inspired by real-life events. Narrator Aman grew up in a quiet, slightly isolated village near Rangpur, where life never felt like something shaped by ambition or progress, but instead felt like a slow, repeating cycle of survival where every day carried the same rhythm of responsibility, effort, and silent endurance. Where mornings began with the sound of distant school bells, echoing through fog, village, sloths, filling with people heading toward work, and the soft rustle of wind moving across rice fields, because in that place, life never waited for anyone to feel ready, and time never slowed down for hesitation. And from childhood, Aman understood something that was never directly spoken, but always clearly reflected in the lives around him, that dreams were not destroyed suddenly, but slowly postponed, until they quietly disappeared under responsibility. And his father worked as a small fisherman, casting nets into a nearby river every day before sunrise, spending long hours under unpredictable weather, returning home with tired eyes, wet clothes, and a silence that carried more meaning than any words ever could, while his mother maintained the emotional structure of the household through quiet discipline, carefully managing very limited income in a way that always ensured survival even during the hardest days. And Aman grew up inside this environment, learning early that life was not about sudden transformation, but continuous adjustment. And in school, he was not exceptional or invisible, just a quiet student sitting somewhere in the middle rows, listening more than speaking, observing more than reacting, often staring outside the classroom window where the river and sky seemed to merge into something larger than his life, and the fields beyond felt like unfinished questions, waiting for answers he had not yet discovered. And that quiet observation slowly turned into something deeper as he grew older. Not loud ambition, but a subtle dissatisfaction with the idea that life must only revolve around repetition and survival. And after completing his studies, he reached a moment where life no longer felt like something happening around him, but something demanding a decision from within him, because two paths appeared in front of him. At the same time was a stable, local office assistant job with fixed salary, predictable routine, and social acceptance that came with safety, while the other was an uncertain opportunity in a startup in the city that offered nothing except instability, long hours, pressure, and the possibility of building something meaningful from nothing. And for many days, Aman lived silently inside this decision, because every voice around him encouraged safety. Every relative repeated the importance of stability, and every logical explanation supported a predictable life. But inside him, there was a quiet resistance that refused to disappear. Not loud, not emotional, but persistent, like a thought that kept returning even in silence. And one evening, he sat with his father beside the riverbank, watching the water move endlessly under fading light. And after a long silence, he asked, "Baba, what if I choose the uncertain path and lose everything I have?" And his father kept watching the river for a moment, then said, "The river also risks everything every day, but it still reaches somewhere." And those words settled inside Aman like something permanent. And after nights of internal struggle, doubt, and reflection, he finally made his decision to join the startup, stepping into a city environment that felt fast, unfamiliar, and unpredictable from the very beginning, because the office was small, slightly disorganized, filled with young people trying to build something without fully understanding how, and nothing felt stable, not even direction itself. And in the beginning, Aman tried to adapt quickly, working long hours, learning systems, observing everything carefully, trying to prove his worth through effort and consistency. But soon he realized that effort alone does not guarantee clarity. And there were nights when he returned to his rented room completely exhausted, sitting in silence under a dim light, staring at the ceiling fan rotating endlessly as if time itself had no destination. And during those moments, he would think about home, about his mother, preparing simple meals with care, about his father casting nets into dark water before sunrise. And a strange mixture of guilt and determination would rise inside him, because every step forward in the city felt like a step away from the life he had always known. And in the startup, he met people: Farhan, Imran, Sohil, Adil, Danish, Saif, Hassan Nihal, Raihan, Ayan, Naim, Ishan, Arif, Shihab, Samiul, Tanvir, Raihan, Adnan, Muntasir, Rohan, Farid, Zidan, and others, each carrying their own invisible struggles, each trying to turn uncertainty into something meaningful. And together, they formed a fragile team, held together not by stability, but by shared confusion, hope, and silent pressure. And often they would sit late at night, surrounded by unfinished ideas, whiteboards filled with half-developed strategies, and empty cups of tea that had gone cold hours ago. And Imran once said with a tired smile, "If this works, people will call us lucky. And if it fails, we will just become another forgotten attempt in someone's story." And they all laughed softly. But the silence that followed was heavier than the joke itself. And as months passed, the startup entered a difficult phase where funding delays began affecting salaries, clients became inconsistent, and pressure slowly turned into an invisible weight that followed everyone everywhere. And Arman found himself becoming more observant, more thoughtful, speaking less but analyzing more. Because he realized that in unstable environments, reaction creates chaos, but observation creates direction. And during this time, his family back home also began facing subtle difficulties, especially his father, whose health slowly weakened after years of continuous fishing labor under harsh conditions, though he never expressed it openly. And Arman would call home regularly, trying to sound normal, hearing reassurances that everything was fine, not realizing that those reassurances were often meant to protect him from distraction. Until one night everything changed when his phone rang late, and his mother's voice came through, trembling and unstable, saying, "Your father got injured in the river today." And in that instant, everything inside Arman froze completely, because suddenly deadlines, meetings, and ambitions felt meaningless compared to the fear of losing someone who had always been his silent foundation. And he rushed back home immediately, traveling through a journey that felt longer than physical distance. And when he reached the hospital and saw his father lying weak, connected to medical support, breathing slowly and irregularly, Arman felt something inside him break in a way he could not explain, because the man he had always seen as strong now looked fragile in a way he was never prepared for. And he sat beside him, holding his hand, feeling the weight of years of sacrifice inside that single touch. And his father slowly opened his eyes and said with effort, "Don't stop your life because of me. Just make it something that proves your struggle was worth it." And those words entered Arman like something permanent that could not be removed. And after days of uncertainty, his father's condition stabilized, but never fully returned to what it once was. And Arman went back to the city carrying a different version of himself, one that no longer saw success as ambition alone, but as responsibility. And the startup soon reached one of its most critical phases, where everything felt like it could collapse at any moment. And one rainy night, when the office was nearly empty and silence filled, every corner Arman sat with Farhan and Imran, listening to the rain hitting the glass like a slow reminder of uncertainty. And Farhan said quietly, "Maybe this is where most people stop." And Imran replied after a pause, "Or maybe this is where people finally understand their own strength." And Arman stayed silent for a long time, feeling everything he had lived, until that moment collided inside him. The struggle, the fear, the responsibility, the memory of his father, the distance from home. And then he finally spoke slowly. "If we stop now, everything becomes only pain. But if we continue, even pain becomes part of something that builds us." And that night, they did not quit. Instead, they rebuilt everything from the ground up, rethinking, restructuring operations from its stakes instead of avoiding them. And slowly, step by step, things began to change, not suddenly but gradually, like light returning after a long darkness, and years passed, but with continuous effort. And Arman changed deeply through that journey, becoming more grounded, more aware that success is not about speed but about endurance. And one evening, after a long day, he stood on the rooftop of the office building with Farhan and Imran beside him, watching the city lights stretch endlessly into the horizon. And Kani said, quietly, "Click. We almost gave up many times." And Arman replied with calm certainty, "Yes, but every time we continued, we became stronger than before." And in that moment, he understood something permanent, that life is not to keep walking when the how easy becomes it beflies. And every hardship to carries a lesson that only time reveals, and every choice shapes a future version of yourself. You will. And every choice shapes a future version of yourself. And as the wind moved across the city under fenning, he realized that truth is not measured avoiding struggle, and the real meaning a person is not again after every fall, and the real meaning of life isn't they choose, but by the resilient between us, when what starts stayed with him like a quiet light that never fades, like Yemen when comfort disappears, and that truth stayed like a light. And to ever fear dust is often just the beginning of finally becoming who they've always meant to be.